The cold metal walls of the research station hummed with alien technology. Captain Do-hyun walked down the long corridor, his boots making soft sounds on the smooth floor. He was the only human on this moon, far from Earth, far from everything. He knew. The other beings here were aliens, and they had been working on something that made his stomach feel heavy with worry. Dr. Minji stood in the main laboratory, her 6 arms moving quickly over the control panels. She was a Valtharian, tall and thin with pale blue skin that seemed to glow under the bright lights. Her large black eyes never blinked as she watched the numbers on her screens. She had been working for months on this project, and today was the day everything would begin. "Captain Do-hyun," she said without looking up. Her voice was soft but had a strange musical quality that all Valtharians had. "You are here to observe. Please do not interfere with the process." Do-hyun nodded and stood near the back of the room. Through the thick glass wall, he could see into the next chamber. There, in a white medical bed, lay Hana. She was sleeping deeply, connected to many tubes and wires. Her black hair spread across the pillow and her face looked peaceful. But Do-hyun knew she was not sleeping by choice. Hana had been captured 6 months ago during a diplomatic mission gone wrong. She was supposed to help make peace between humans and the Galactic Research Consortium. She was good at talking to people, good at making them feel comfortable and safe. She could read faces and voices in ways that amazed everyone who met her. The aliens had been so impressed with her abilities that they decided they needed more people like her. But instead of asking for volunteers, they chose a different path. They would make copies of her. "The subject shows perfect biological stability," announced Dr. Giel from across the room. He was an insectoid being with 4 arms and compound eyes that reflected the light like jewels. His voice buzzed when he spoke. "All neural pathways have been mapped and recorded." "Excellent," Dr. Minji replied. "Begin the first replication sequence." The machines around Hana began to glow with blue light. Do-hyun watched as scanners moved over her body, recording everything. Her DNA, her brain patterns, even the exact arrangement of every cell. The aliens believed that if they could copy all of this perfectly, they would have perfect copies of Hana. In the next room, a new chamber began to fill with a thick, clear liquid. Inside the liquid, something began to form. First, it was just a small cluster of cells. Then it grew larger, taking shape. Arms, legs, a head with black hair. In just 2 hours, there was a perfect copy of Hana floating in the tank. "Fascinating," said Supervisor Tyke, a being made of living crystal who stood near the observation window. When he spoke, his voice sounded like wind chimes. "The replication is proceeding exactly as calculated." Do-hyun felt sick watching this. To him, what they were doing was wrong. Hana was a person, not a thing to be copied. But he had been ordered to observe and report back to Earth Command. He could not stop what was happening. The first clone was removed from the tank and placed on a medical table. Machines worked on her, filling her mind with memories and knowledge. These were not her real memories, but programmed information about diplomacy, about alien cultures, about how to negotiate and make peace. When the clone opened her eyes, she looked exactly like Hana. She sat up and smiled. "Hello," she said. "I am ready to serve the consortium." Dr. Minji clapped her hands together with joy. "Perfect. The personality matrix has integrated successfully. Begin the next replication." More tanks filled with liquid. More copies began to grow. By the end of the first day, there were 12 clones of Hana. By the end of the week, there were 50. Each one looked identical. Each one had the same programmed memories and skills. But Do-hyun noticed something the aliens did not. See, when he looked at the clones, they seemed empty somehow. They smiled at the right times and said the right words, but their eyes were different. There was no warmth in them, no real feeling. The real Hana, still sleeping in her medical bed, had eyes that showed kindness even when she was unconscious. Her face had tiny lines from years of smiling and laughing. Her hands had small scars from a childhood spent climbing trees and playing outside. These clones had perfect skin and perfect features, but they were missing something important. Dr. Minji, Do-Yun said during a break in the cloning process. May I ask you something? She turned to face him, her large eyes curious. What is your question, Captain? How do you know these copies will work the same way as the original? Dr. Minji smiled, showing teeth that were too white and too sharp. We have copied everything perfectly. Every memory, every skill, every pattern of thought. They are improvements on the original, actually. We have removed unnecessary emotions and enhanced their diplomatic abilities. But what about her personality? Her real feelings? Feelings are just chemical reactions in the brain. Dr. Guile buzzed from his workstation. We have replicated the brain chemistry exactly. Do-Hyun shook his head. I think there might be more to it than that. Dr. Minji laughed, a sound like silver bells. Captain, with respect, humans have many superstitions about consciousness and souls. We are scientists. We deal with facts and data. What we cannot measure does not exist. The next morning, they began sending the first clones out on diplomatic missions. Each clone was given a ship and sent to a different part of the galaxy. Their job was to negotiate peace treaties, trade agreements, and cultural exchanges. Dr. Minji was confident they would succeed. She had created what she believed were perfect diplomatic agents. But Do-Hyun had a feeling that the aliens had made a terrible mistake. They had copied Hana's body and filled it with knowledge, but they had missed the most important part of what made her special. As he watched another batch of clones being prepared for deployment, Do-Hyun wondered if anyone would ever see the real Hana again. She lay in her medical bed, forgotten by everyone except him. To the aliens, she was just the original template, no longer needed now that they had perfected the copying process. But Do-Hyun knew better. The real Hana was irreplaceable, and soon the galaxy would learn that lesson too. 3 weeks after the first clones were sent across the galaxy, the reports began coming back to the research station. Captain Do-Yun sat in the communication center, listening to the messages with growing concern. Each report told the same story, but Dr. Minji and her team refused to see the pattern. Mission report from Sector 7, announced the communication officer, a floating blob-like creature named Operator Wanho. His voice bubbled as he spoke. Clone designation H-47 successfully. Negotiated mining rights with the Christek Empire. Treaty signed and filed. Dr. Minji smiled and made notes on her datapad. Excellent. Another success. But Do-Hyun had read the full report, not just the summary. The Christek Empire had agreed to the mining treaty, yes, but they had also filed a formal complaint about the negotiator. They said she was cold and mechanical, unable to understand their cultural concerns about sacred crystal formations. The treaty was signed, but the relationship between the species had actually gotten worse. Next report, Dr. Minji said, still pleased with herself. Clone H-23 completed trade negotiations with the flowing ones of Aquatica Prime. Operator Wanho continued. Basic agreement reached. Again, Dr. Minji celebrated. But Do-Hyun knew the rest of the story. The flowing ones were water-based creatures who communicated through emotional currents in their liquid bodies. The clone had completely missed their subtle emotional language. She had focused only on numbers and trade goods, ignoring the deep cultural exchange the flowing ones had wanted. They felt insulted and had only agreed to a minimal trade deal instead of the full partnership they had originally offered. More reports came in throughout the day. On the surface, most missions appeared successful. Treaties were signed, agreements were reached, and conflicts were resolved. But when Do-Hyun looked deeper, he saw the real story. The clones were doing their jobs, but they were creating new problems everywhere they went. Clone H-91 had prevented a war between two species, but she had done it by threatening both sides instead of finding a solution they could both accept. The war was stopped, but both species now hated the consortium. Clone H-156 had negotiated a peace treaty between feuding colonies, but she had ignored the emotional reasons for their conflict. The treaty looked good on paper, but the colonists were already planning to break it because their real concerns had never been addressed. Dr. Minji, Do-Hyun said after the communication session ended. I think we need to talk about these reports. She looked at him with confusion. What is there to discuss? The clones are performing excellently. Success rates are above 90%. But, are they really successful? Do-hyun asked. Look at the follow-up reports. Look at what happens after the clones leave. Dr. Gyeol buzzed with annoyance. The clones complete their assigned tasks. What happens afterward is not our concern. It should be, Do-hyun said. The original Hana did not just complete tasks. She built relationships. She made people trust her and like her. These clones are just going through the motions. Dr. Minji activated a holographic display showing success statistics. Bright green. Numbers filled the air around them. Look at this data, Captain. 93% mission completion rate. Treaties signed, conflicts resolved, trade agreements established. This is the most successful diplomatic program in galactic history. Supervisor, Taik chimed in with his crystal voice. The clones are superior to the original in every measurable way. They have enhanced memory, faster processing speed, and perfect recall of diplomatic protocols. Then why are we getting complaints? Do-hyun asked. The alien scientists looked at each other with confusion. Dr. Minji pulled up another screen. We have received 47 formal complaints about clone behavior. This represents only 4.3% of all interactions. What kind of complaints? Do-hyun pressed. Dr. Gyeol read from his datapad. Lack of emotional understanding, mechanical responses, inability to read social cues, failure to establish personal connections. He buzzed with dismissal. These are subjective complaints with no measurable impact on mission outcomes. Do-hyun felt frustration building in his chest. Those complaints are exactly the problem. The clones might be completing their missions, but they are not doing what Hana did best. Which was what exactly? Dr. Minji asked. She made people feel understood. She listened not just to their words, but to their feelings. She could tell when someone was afraid or angry or sad, even when they tried to hide it. She connected with beings on an emotional level. Dr. Minji shook her head. Emotions are inefficient. They cloud judgment and slow decision-making. We programmed the clones to focus on logic and results. But emotions are what make diplomacy work, Do-hyun argued. People do not make agreements just because they make sense. They make agreements with people they trust and like. A new message came through the communication system. This one was marked as urgent. Operator Wanho's voice became more serious. Priority message from the Helix Nebula. Clone H203 has experienced complete mission failure. Requesting immediate extraction. The laboratory fell silent. This was the first total failure they had received. Display the full report, Dr. Minji ordered. The holographic screen filled with text. Clone H203 had been sent to mediate a dispute between two mining companies. The dispute was simple, a matter of overlapping claims on an asteroid field. It should have been easy to resolve. But according to the report, the clone had made everything worse. She had treated both sides like computer programs, feeding them legal information and expecting them to accept logical solutions. When the miners became emotional about their claims, she had dismissed their feelings as irrelevant. When they tried to explain their personal histories with the asteroid field, she had cut them off and demanded they focus on facts. The situation had escalated until both mining companies had walked out of the negotiations. They were now preparing for armed conflict, something that had never been a possibility before the clone arrived. This is an anomaly, Dr. Minji said quickly. One failure among hundreds of successes, but more urgent messages began arriving throughout the day. Clone H089 had caused a diplomatic incident on Rigel Station. Clone H134 had accidentally insulted an entire species during a cultural exchange ceremony. Clone H177 had triggered a trade war by misunderstanding economic customs. Dr. Minji and her team worked frantically to analyze the failures. They ran diagnostic programs on the clones, checked their programming, and reviewed their training protocols. Everything appeared to be functioning perfectly. The problem is not with our technology, Dr. Gyeol concluded after hours of testing. These failures are random anomalies. But Do-hyun knew better. The failures were not random. They were happening whenever the clones encountered situations that required real emotional intelligence, real empathy, real human connection. Late that night, Do-hyun walked alone through the corridors of the research station. He stopped at the medical bay where the real Hana still lay sleeping. Her monitoring equipment showed steady vital signs, but she looked paler than before. "They do not understand," he whispered to her unconscious form. "They think they copied everything that made you special, but they missed the most important part." As if responding to his words, Hana's fingers twitched slightly. For a moment, Do-hyun thought she might wake up, but she remained still, trapped, in artificial sleep while her imperfect copies failed across the galaxy. Tomorrow, he decided, he would have to make Dr. Minji understand the truth about what they had created. The clones were not improvements on Hana. They were hollow imitations, and the galaxy was beginning to notice. Captain Do-hyun could not sleep. Every night for the past week, he lay in his small quarters thinking about Hana and the failing clones. The reports kept getting worse, but Dr. Minji and her team still refused to see the real problem. Tonight, he decided to do something about it. The research station was quiet during the night cycle. Most of the alien staff did not need sleep the way humans did, but they followed a schedule to maintain efficiency. Do-hyun moved carefully through the corridors, avoiding the security cameras he had memorized during his weeks of observation. He had noticed that certain areas of the station were marked as restricted. Dr. Minji had told him these sections contained sensitive equipment and biological samples. But Do-hyun suspected they contained something more important. He needed to know what the aliens were hiding. The first restricted door required a security code. Do-hyun had watched Dr. Gil enter this section several times and had memorized the pattern of his finger movements. The lock opened with a soft beep. Inside, he found rows of storage tanks filled with genetic material. Labels in alien script covered each container. He could not read the writing, but he recognized some of the specimens: hair samples, skin cells, and blood from the original Hana. They were keeping her biological material like ingredients in a recipe. The next room contained computer terminals displaying brain scans and neural maps. Do-hyun studied the screens, trying to understand what he was seeing. The images showed the inside of Hana's mind, every memory and thought pattern recorded in perfect detail. To the aliens, this was all that mattered. They believed consciousness was just data that could be copied and transferred. But Do-hyun knew they were wrong. He had seen the difference between Hana and her clones. The real Hana had something that could not be measured or recorded. He continued, deeper into the restricted area, following signs that pointed to what the aliens called the primary storage facility. The corridor led to a heavily secured door with multiple locks and warning signs in several languages, using tools he had borrowed. From the maintenance section, Do-hyun worked on the electronic locks. His military training had taught him basic security bypassing, and alien technology was not so different from human systems. After 20 minutes of careful work, the door opened. The room beyond took his breath away. It was enormous, filled with hundreds of cylindrical tanks reaching from floor to ceiling. Each tank contained a human figure floating in preservation fluid, men, women, and children of all ages, all perfectly preserved and all unconscious. Do-hyun realized with horror that Hana was not the only human being held here. The aliens had been collecting humans for years, using them as templates for their cloning experiments. Each person was being kept alive as a living library of genetic and neural information. He found Hana in the center of the room, suspended in a tank twice the size of the others. Tubes and wires connected to her body monitored every biological function. Her face looked peaceful, but Do-hyun could see she was thinner than when he had last seen her in the medical bay. The aliens were slowly draining her life force to power their cloning machines. "You should not be here, Captain." Do-hyun spun around to find Dr. Minji standing in the doorway. Her 6 arms were crossed, and her large black eyes showed no emotion. "What is this place?" Do-hyun demanded. "This is our preservation facility," she replied calmly. "We maintain the original subjects in perfect condition for future research needs. These are people, not research subjects." You are keeping them prisoner. Dr. Minji walked closer, her footsteps echoing in the large room. They are volunteers who agreed to help advance galactic civilization. Their sacrifice allows us to create superior beings for diplomatic and scientific purposes. Volunteers? Do-hyun's voice rose with anger. Hana was captured during a diplomatic mission. She never agreed to this. The details of acquisition are not relevant, Dr. Minji said. What matters is the greater good. One original human can provide templates for thousands of improved copies. Do-hyun looked back at Hana floating helplessly in her tank. The copies are not improved. They are broken. They cannot do what she could do. The statistical data disagrees with your assessment. Forget the statistics, Do-hyun said. Look at what is actually happening. The clones are causing more problems than they solve. Just yesterday, clone H-298 started a war between two peaceful species because she could not understand their cultural rituals. Dr. Minji paused. More reports of clone failures had been arriving daily, and even she was beginning to notice the pattern. But her scientific pride would not let her admit that their technology might be flawed. There may be minor calibration issues, she said carefully. We are working to optimize the programming. It is not a programming problem, Do-hyun insisted. The clones are missing something that cannot be programmed. They have Hana's memories and knowledge, but they do not have her heart. They do not have her soul. Soul is a primitive concept with no scientific basis. Then explain why the clones keep failing. Explain why they cannot connect with other beings the way Hana could. Dr. Minji was quiet for a long moment. She walked to Hana's tank and placed one of her hands against the glass. The original subject shows unique neural patterns that we have been unable to fully replicate. There are quantum fluctuations in her brain activity that seem random, but may serve some unknown function. Those fluctuations are not random, Do-hyun said. They are what make her alive. They are what make her real. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, the clone failures continued to multiply. Clone H-445 had been sent to negotiate a simple trade agreement between two merchant guilds. Instead of finding a compromise that both sides could accept, she had applied rigid mathematical formulas to determine fair pricing. The merchants felt insulted by her cold approach and had decided to stop trading altogether, rather than work with someone who treated them like numbers in an equation. Clone H-376 had been assigned to help resolve a family dispute on a mining colony. The problem was emotional, involving hurt feelings and broken trust between family members. The clone had provided logical solutions and legal advice, but she had completely ignored the pain and anger that was driving the conflict. The family had rejected her help and their dispute had grown worse. On the research station, Dr. Gyeol buzzed with frustration as he reviewed the latest failure reports. The success rate has dropped to 67%. This is unacceptable. Supervisor. Take chimed with concern. Perhaps we should consider suspending the program until we can identify the source of these malfunctions. But Dr. Minji refused to give up. She had invested too much time and resources into the cloning project to admit failure now. We will find the solution. We will perfect the replication process. Dr. Jae-won, a quiet researcher who had been studying the neural patterns, spoke up. I have been analyzing the quantum fluctuations in the original subject's brain activity. There appears to be a complex pattern that we have been unable to reproduce in the clones. What kind of pattern? Dr. Minji asked. It resembles what humans call intuition or emotional intelligence. The fluctuations seem to trigger responses that are not based on programmed knowledge, but on some form of spontaneous understanding. Supervisor Nara, who had been silent until now, added her analysis. The original subject's brain shows activity in regions that serve no apparent logical function. These areas may be responsible for what humans call creativity and empathy. Dr. Minji felt a chill of realization. If the other researchers were right, then the humans might possess something that advanced alien science could not replicate or understand. Back in the preservation facility, Do-hyun continued to argue with Dr. Minji. You have to wake her up. You have to let me talk to her. That is impossible. Awakening her could disrupt the preservation process. The preservation process is killing her, Do-hyun said. Look at her. She is getting weaker every day. Dr. Minji looked at Hana again. The human did appear to be declining despite the perfect life support systems. 5 minutes, Do-hyun pleaded. Just let me wake her for 5 minutes. Let me prove to you that she has something your clones do not. Dr. Minji considered this request. The clone failures were becoming impossible to ignore, and her scientific curiosity was stronger than her pride. Very well, she said finally. But if this experiment fails, the original subject returns to preservation immediately. As Dr. Minji began the process of safely awakening Hana, Do-hyun felt hope for the first time since arriving at the research station. Finally, he would have a chance to show the aliens what they had been missing all along. The machines around Hana's tank hummed quietly as Dr. Minji began the awakening process. Captain Do-hyun watched nervously as the preservation fluid slowly drained away. Hana's body, which had been floating peacefully for months, now rested on the bottom of the tank. The process will take several minutes, Dr. Minji explained. We must bring her consciousness back gradually to avoid shock. Do-hyun pressed his hand against the glass. Hana, can you hear me? It is Do-hyun, you are safe. Her eyelids fluttered slightly. Then slowly, her dark eyes opened. For a moment, she looked confused and afraid. The bright lights and alien equipment around her tank must have seemed like a nightmare. Do-hyun? She whispered, her voice weak from months of silence. Where are we? What happened? We are on an alien research station, he said gently. They have been keeping you asleep while they made copies of you. Hana tried to sit up, but the tubes connected to her body made movement difficult. Dr. Minji used her instruments to carefully remove the medical equipment. Copies? Hana asked. What do you mean? They cloned you, Do-hyun explained. Hundreds of times. They sent the clones across the galaxy to work as diplomats. Hana's eyes widened with shock and anger. They had no right to do that. I never agreed to any of this. Dr. Minji stepped forward. You are the original template. Your diplomatic abilities were deemed valuable for galactic peace. I am not a template, Hana said firmly, despite her weakness. I am a person. And what you did was wrong. The tank opened with a hiss of escaping air. Dr. Minji helped Hana step out, wrapping her in a warm blanket. She was unsteady on her feet, but her eyes were alert and angry. Tell me about the clones, she said to Do-hyun. Are they working? Do-hyun shook his head. They are failing. They can complete basic tasks, but they cannot do what you do best. They cannot really connect with people. Of course they cannot, Hana said. Being a diplomat is not about following rules or remembering facts. It is about understanding how people feel and what they really need. Dr. Minji watched this conversation with growing interest. The original subject was showing behaviors that none of the clones had displayed. There was something in her voice, in the way she moved and spoke, that seemed more alive than anything they had been able to create. Suddenly, alarms began blaring throughout the research station. The emergency communication system activated, and Operator Wanho's panicked voice filled the air. Priority alert from the Nexus system. Critical diplomatic crisis in progress. Clone H892 has caused complete breakdown in peace negotiations between the Flame Dancers and the Ice Walkers. Both species are preparing for war. Immediate intervention required. Dr. Minji's face went pale. The Flame Dancers and Ice Walkers had been fighting for over a century. A recent ceasefire had given hope for permanent peace, but now that hope was crashing down. What happened? She demanded. The full report came through quickly. Clone H892 had been sent to mediate the final peace treaty between the two species. The Flame Dancers were beings of pure energy who communicated through light and heat. The Ice Walkers were crystalline creatures who spoke through subtle changes in temperature and ice formation. The clone had been programmed with all the technical knowledge needed for the negotiations. She knew both languages, understood both cultures, and had access to legal frameworks for peace treaties. But when the real negotiations began, everything went wrong. The Flame Dancers had wanted to perform a ritual of trust, where both species would share their deepest fears about the War. This was not part of any diplomatic protocol. The clone had dismissed the ritual as irrelevant and had tried to force both sides to focus on territorial boundaries and trade agreements. When the Ice Walkers had tried to explain their grief over losses in the war, the clone had told them that past events were not relevant to future agreements. When the Flame Dancers had expressed their hope for their children to live in peace, the clone had asked them to provide statistical data on population growth instead. Both species had left the negotiations feeling insulted and misunderstood. Now they were mobilizing their fleets for a war that could destroy entire star systems. "We need to send another clone immediately," Dr. Guyal buzzed with urgency. "No," Hana said firmly. "Send me." Everyone in the room turned to look at her. She was still weak from her long imprisonment, still wrapped in a blanket, but her voice was strong and determined. "You are not ready," Dr. Minji protested. "You have been in preservation for months. Your body needs time to recover." "My body might be weak, but my mind is clear," Hana replied, "and my heart is something your clones will never have." "This is too dangerous," Do-hyun said. "If you cannot stop this war, millions of beings will die." Hana looked at him with the same gentle smile he remembered from their first meeting years ago. "That is exactly why I have to try. Those beings deserve someone who will really listen to them, not just process their words like data." Dr. Minji was torn between her scientific curiosity and her concern for the mission. The clone program was clearly failing, but risking the original subject seemed dangerous. "What would you do differently?" she asked Hana. "I would start by apologizing," Hana said. "The clone hurt their feelings and damaged their trust. Before we can talk about peace, we need to heal that damage." "Apologizing is not part of standard diplomatic protocol," Supervisor Tyke chimed. "Maybe that is the problem with your protocols," Hana replied. "Sometimes the most important part of negotiation happens before you even start talking about the issues. Sometimes you need to make people feel safe and respected before they will trust you with their hopes and fears." Dr. Jae-hwan, who had been quietly studying brain scans, spoke up. "The original subject is showing neural activity patterns that we have never seen in the clones. There are connections between emotional processing centers and logical reasoning areas that appear to be unique. Those connections are what you call intuition," Hana explained. "When I talk to someone, I am not just hearing their words. I am feeling their emotions, understanding their fears, seeing the things they cannot say out loud." "How is that possible?" Dr. Minji asked. "I do not know how it works," Hana admitted, "but I know that it does work. When I was a child, I could always tell when my mother was sad, even when she was smiling. When I became a diplomat, I learned to use that ability to help people trust each other. More urgent messages came through the communication system. The Flame Dancers and Ice Walkers were moving their fleets into position. They had given the consortium 12 hours to provide a solution, or they would resume their war. "We have to try," Do-hyun said to Dr. Minji. "The clones have failed. Let Hana show you what real diplomacy looks like." Dr. Minji looked around the room at her fellow researchers. Dr. Gil was buzzing with nervous energy. Supervisor Tyke was chiming softly with worry. Even the analytical supervisor Nara seemed uncertain. "If we send you and you fail," Dr. Minji said to Hana, "both species will be destroyed. The responsibility will be enormous." "The responsibility is already enormous," Hana replied. "Your clones created this crisis. Now let me try to fix it." "Doctor," Minji made her decision. "Prepare the fastest ship. We will transport the original subject to the Nexus system immediately." As the medical team began preparing Hana for travel, she looked at Do-hyun with determination in her eyes. "I am going to show them what it means to be human," she said. "I am going to show them that some things cannot be copied or programmed." The fate of two civilizations now rested in the hands of one tired, weakened, but very real human being. The ship carrying Hana to the Nexus system was the fastest vessel in the consortium fleet. Captain Do-hyun sat beside her in the medical bay, watching as she prepared for what might be the most important negotiation in galactic history. Despite the advanced medical equipment helping her recover, she still looked fragile and tired. "Are you sure you can do this?" he asked quietly. Hana smiled, the same warm expression that had made her famous throughout human space. I have to try. Those beings are afraid and angry, and they need someone who understands what that feels like. Dr. Minji worked at a nearby console, monitoring Hana's vital signs and reviewing the diplomatic files. The situation has gotten worse during our travel time. Both fleets are now in weapons range. Any aggressive move could start the shooting. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear reports from the crisis zone. The Flame Dancers had formed a burning wall of energy ships between them and the Ice Walkers. The Ice Walkers had created a defensive formation of crystal vessels that reflected and amplified light into deadly beams. Both sides were ready for war. Tell me about them, Hana said. Not the facts from your files, but what they really care about. Dr. Minji looked confused. What do you mean? What makes them happy? What frightens them? What do they love most in their lives? I do not understand how that information is relevant to peace negotiations. It is the most relevant information of all, Hana said. People do not fight over territory or resources. They fight because they are afraid of losing something they love. Do-hyun pulled up cultural files on both species. The Flame Dancers are nomads who travel between stars. Their ships are their homes, and they have been searching for a permanent place to settle for generations. The Ice Walkers are builders who create beautiful crystal cities. They have lived in the same system for thousands of years. So the Flame Dancers want a home and the Ice Walkers are afraid of losing theirs, Hana said thoughtfully. That is not really a conflict about territory. That is a conflict about belonging and security. The ship arrived at the Nexus system, with only 3 hours remaining before the deadline. The scene outside was terrifying. Hundreds of ships from both species faced each other across empty space, their weapons charging and ready. Consortium vessel, this is Fleet Commander Blazeheart of the Flame Dancers, came a voice like crackling fire over the radio. You have failed us once already. Why should we listen to you again? This is Ice Marshal Crystalwing of the Walker. Fleet, added a voice like wind through frozen caves. Your previous representative insulted our dead and dismissed our pain. We want nothing more to do with your kind. Hana asked for the communication system. When Dr. Minji hesitated, Do-hyun nodded his encouragement. Commander Blazeheart, Marshal Crystalwing, this is Hana. I am not here as a representative of the consortium. I am here as someone who wants to understand your pain. There was silence on both channels. Then Commander Blazeheart spoke, his voice suspicious. You sound different from the other one. I am different, Hana said simply. The previous negotiator was not really me. She was a copy, and copies cannot feel what I feel. May I come aboard your ships? I would like to speak with you face to face. Impossible, Marshal Crystalwing said. No outsider has been permitted on our vessels for a century. Then let me prove I am sincere, Hana replied. I will come alone in a small shuttle with no weapons. If you do not trust me after we talk, you can destroy my ship and continue your war. Dr. Minji looked horrified. That is an enormous risk. If they kill you, we lose everything we have worked for. If I do not try, they kill each other, Hana said. That is a much bigger loss. Against all protocol and common sense, both fleet commanders agreed to meet with Hana. She took a small shuttle and flew first to the Flame Dancer flagship, a ship that looked like a controlled star surrounded by metal framework. Commander Blazeheart was a being of pure energy contained in a humanoid shape. When he spoke, flames danced around his form. Why should we trust you after what your people did to us? Because I am going to start by admitting that we were wrong, Hana said. The previous negotiator hurt you, and I am sorry for that pain. She did not understand what this conflict really means to you. The commander's flames flickered with surprise. No consortium representative had ever apologized before. Tell me about your people, Hana continued. Not the political details, but what it feels like to be a flame dancer. For the next hour, Commander Blazeheart told Hana about the loneliness of wandering between stars, about children who had never seen a sunrise from solid ground, about the dream of having a place to call home. Hana listened, not just to his words, but to the pain and hope in his voice. "We do not want to take anything from the Ice Walkers," he said finally. "We just want somewhere to belong." Next, Hana visited the Ice Walker flagship, a crystalline vessel that looked like a frozen cathedral. Marshal Crystal Wing was made of living ice and crystal, her body shifting and reflecting light as she moved. "Your predecessor told us that our grief over the war was irrelevant," the Marshal said, her voice cold with anger. "She said the dead should be forgotten in favor of the future." "She was wrong," Hana said. "The dead should never be forgotten. Tell me about them." Marshal Crystalwing spoke about ice sculptures that memorialized fallen warriors, about crystal gardens where families remembered their loved ones, about the fear that war would destroy the beautiful things they had built to honor the past. "We are not afraid of sharing our system," she admitted. "We are afraid of losing who we are." After speaking with both leaders, Hana had an idea. She asked them to meet together in the space between their fleets, each bringing a small delegation. "I do not think your peoples are really enemies," she told them when they gathered in the neutral shuttle bay. "I think you both want the same thing." "How can that be?" Commander Blazeheart asked. "They want to stay, and we want a home." "But what you both really want is to belong somewhere," Hana explained. "Commander, your people have been searching for a home for generations. Marshal, your people have been protecting their home for thousands of years. You are both experts at what the other needs to learn." She turned to the Ice Walker delegation. "You know how to build lasting communities, how to create beauty that honors the past. The Flame Dancers need that knowledge." Then she faced the Flame Dancer group. "You know how to adapt and survive, how to find hope in difficult times. The Ice Walkers need that strength as they face an uncertain future. What are you suggesting?" Marshal Crystalwing asked. "I am suggesting that instead of fighting over this system, you share it in a way that makes both peoples stronger," Hana said. "The Ice Walkers can teach the Flame Dancers how to build permanent homes. The Flame Dancers can teach the Ice Walkers how to explore new possibilities." The idea was simple, but revolutionary. Instead of dividing the system between them, the two species would create integrated communities. Flame Dancer children would learn Ice Walker arts of crystal building. Ice Walker youth would learn Flame Dancer skills of adaptation and exploration. "Your clone could never have thought of this," Commander Blazeheart said to Hana. She was focused on dividing territory, not bringing people together. "Because she could not feel what you feel," Hana replied. She could not understand that this was never really about space or resources. It was about fear and hope and the need to belong. The negotiations took another 6 hours, but they ended with signatures on a treaty unlike any in galactic history. Instead of a simple peace agreement, it was a pact of mutual learning and growth. Dr. Minji watched the signing ceremony with amazement. "How did you know this would work?" "I did not know," Hana admitted. "But I believed it could work because I could feel how much both sides wanted peace. The clone could not feel that desire, so she could not find a way to fulfill it." When they returned to the research station, Dr. Minji made a difficult announcement to her team. "The cloning program is being terminated. We will begin the process of safely shutting down all remaining clones." "What about our research?" Dr. Gael buzzed with disappointment. "Our research was based on a false assumption," Dr. Minji replied. "We believed that consciousness could be copied like data. But we have learned that the most important parts of consciousness cannot be measured or replicated." Over the following weeks, all the clones were peacefully decommissioned. The other captured humans in the preservation facility were awakened and given the choice to return home or work voluntarily with the consortium. Most chose to go home, but a few, including Hana, decided to stay and help train alien diplomats in the art of genuine communication and empathy. "You could have gone back to Earth," Doyun said to her as they watched the last transport ship depart. "I could have," Hana agreed. "But there is still work to do here. The galaxy needs more beings who understand that diplomacy is not about winning or losing. It is about helping people find ways to live together." Dr. Minji approached them, looking humbled by everything she had learned. "We owe you an apology, Hana. We treated you as an object to be copied instead of a person to be respected. Apology. Accepted, Hana said with a smile. But more importantly, you learned something valuable. You learned that the most important things about any being cannot be copied or programmed. They can only